Yesterday, the Senate passed the USA Freedom Act, the first major overhaul of government surveillance since the 9/11 attacks. Joining us from Washington, the ranking member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Also with us, U.S. diplomatic correspondent for the Financial Times, Jeff Dyer. Good to have you both.
Congressman, let me start with you, and we want to talk about the Patriot Act, obviously, but there is a headline in the New York Times that just can't be ignored, and I'd love for you guys to talk about it. More evidence, apparently, that Assad's forces are actually aiding ISIS and using, some are saying that Assad's warplanes are being used is ISIS's Air Force. What can you tell us about that? And if that's the case, what should we do? What can we do?
Well, Joe, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And I think certainly early in this civil war in Syria, Assad wanted to make a self-fulfilling prophecy out of his claims that it was either him or the terrorists. So, yeah, he would go after the moderate opposition. He knew really the threat to his leadership were the moderates, not the jihadis. And so he would bomb them, he would attack them, he would direct most of his military power against the moderates. And ISIS, frankly, knew the same thing. They had maybe this unspoken Faustian bargain where ISIS and al-Nusra, they would go after the moderate opposition as well, knowing that was the real threat to him. And they would essentially agree to fight each other later. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Assad continues to concentrate his air power not on ISIS, because that's all that gives him any legitimacy is fighting ISIS, but rather continually on that moderate opposition.
So, Jeff Dyer, there's so many of our allies around the Middle East that don't want to get involved in this fight against ISIS because they don't want to aid Assad. Was Barack Obama right so long ago when he said Assad must go? Will there not be peace in this region until Assad is gone?
Well, that's the sort of the impossible issue, because what the administration would like to see is a managed transition where Assad is persuaded to stand down. But one of the real fears is if his regime was to collapse, there would be a vacuum, and groups like ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, would rush into that vacuum and fill the gap. Be an even more unstable, dangerous situation. So just having Assad go tomorrow is absolutely not necessarily the solution that the U.S. would want to see.
Congressman, it's Willie Geist. I know it's a complicated question, but if you can put it in a nutshell what exactly the United States strategy is to fight ISIS inside Syria, what would you say?
Well, you know, first, for a moment, staying on Assad, I do think that we're starting to see an opening here where there are cracks in the Alawite regime, where Russia, I think, is starting to see the writing on the wall that Assad can no longer be expected to persist as the ruler of a unified Syria. Iran may be reaching that conclusion, too, and that opens the window to that kind of a managed transition away from Assad. Assad is not an indispensable party for any of the regional powers. They just want a government there that's not going to be a threat to them. So there may be some opportunities here. In terms of what options we have, apart from pursuing that kind of diplomatic exit for Assad, it's very hard. You know, I think we continue to have to degrade ISIS in Syria while, frankly, we take the main fight to ISIS in Iraq. The battlefield has its own geography, and I think that geography dictates that we defeat ISIS in Iraq first.
Congressman, let's talk about the Patriot Act. Is the country safer or a little less safe since the reforms are being passed?
Well, I think the country is probably as safe, but basically we have done a lot to maintain these national security capabilities while at the same time better protecting and respecting the privacy rights of the American people. The only change in terms of national security, because we'll preserve the ability to get this data, the telephone companies will hold on to it, but we can go to them with court process. The only real impact on national security is it's going to be a bit less efficient. I think we have to acknowledge that. It's more efficient if the government were to gather all this bulk data and be able to harmonize it. But frankly, if efficiency was the sole criterion, we wouldn't have a Fourth Amendment. So it's always going to be a balance between security and privacy. And I think this broadly supported compromise really hits the sweet spot in terms of both.
Jeff Dyer, I guess a question that critics of this legislation would have is, why do you make these dramatic changes when there's not one example that's been stated yet of anybody's privacy rights being violated?
Well, at the same time, the defenders of this program couldn't actually come up with any examples where it actually prevented a terrorist attack. I mean, it seems to me that the sort of backstory to all this is the intelligence community has known ever since the Snowden revelations it's going to have to lose some of its capabilities. And I think some of them are probably quite happy to make a tactical retreat on this particular program because they not only is incredibly controversial, it's the one that really has generated a lot of opposition and really made people very concerned about their privacy, but also because it seems to be one of the least effective bits of the very, very broad surveillance capabilities the U.S. has.
All right.
Congressman Adam Schiff and Jeff Dyer, thank you very much.
Thank you guys for being with us. We really do appreciate it.